energy efficiency or to reduce emissions and so on, by taking away money from patients who are suffering from tuberculosis or AIDS, or from children who are depending on aid for milk or for school. So we do have this crisis in financing. We need to reverse the drop in development aid. That has to increase tremendously, and within that increase, there has to be an increase towards climate change. We are not seeing it at the moment, and this is what is causing the crisis in our climate talks.
I want to thank you both very much for joining us. Martin Kaur is the Executive Director of the South Center based in Geneva, journalist and former Director of the Third World Network in Malaysia. And thank you so much to Nitin Sethi, Senior Assistant Editor at The Hindu, responsible for leaking the U.S. cable on the climate negotiations before the summit began here in Warsaw. We'll link to it at democracynow.org. We're broadcasting from Warsaw, Poland. Back in a minute. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. For those who are just listening to this broadcast, you can go to our website to see this video that was created by Cough for Coal. It is a video of a huge plastic 9-foot lungs that are walked through the streets of Warsaw in protest. Yes, this is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting from the capital of Poland, where the UN Climate Change Summit is taking place. I'm Amy Goodman. Since we arrived here in Warsaw, 18 people have died on the Italian island of Sardinia in Cyclone Cleopatra. At least 6 people have been killed by tornadoes in Illinois, and the people of the Philippines continue to recover from the strongest typhoon to hit landfall in history. We turn now to a voice from Africa. Just before we went to air, Somali youth climate activist Marian Osman addressed the main plenary here at the UN climate talks in Warsaw.
21 years. This year marks 21 years since the conception of the UNFCCC, and for those years, I asked negotiators, just what do you have to show for yourselves? This convention was conceived to curb temperature increases and cope with impacts of current climate change. Yet here and now, 21 years later, atmospheric CO2 has reached unprecedented levels, and our adaptation fund remains full of nothing but empty promises. You all gather here under the pretense of collaboration for a sustainable future, and yet sit in this plenary divided. Past, present, and future responsibilities must be held accountable, but not while undermining global action to combat climate change. There's a Somali proverb that goes, "A mere finger cannot obscure the sun." You cannot hide the truth by deception. As any one of the thousands who are in need in Somalia and the Philippines this week could tell you, no amount of political stalling can hide the fact that a climate crisis is here. The defining problem of my generation blinds us, burns us, and it's easy to look away. But why raise a finger when we could join hands? Member states, rather than the interests of corporate lobbyists and money, let your definitive common ground guide your politics. We, the youth, your shared future, transcend borders, emphasize cooperation and mutual understanding. Corporations may have a responsibility to their shareholders, but they are a fraction of this world's population. This convention has a responsibility to ensure the health of our planet. Though we have been charged for championing naive and unrealistic expectations for this convention, it has been the ambition and unbridled hope of youth that has made up the driving force in what has become an uphill battle for climate justice. As our window of opportunity to avoid irreversible climate change closes, and you, the current climate architects, idle, we persist, idealistically perhaps, but in full regard of the science behind our precarious circumstances and armed with an urgency to match. We are not just a special interest group. We are the future scientists, economists, and politicians of this convention, the principal recipients of this negotiation's outcome. Where human existence is non-negotiable, you've made a 21-year wager on our future. In these final hours, ministers and delegates, I beg, do not let Warsaw become a second Copenhagen. Greed and petty interests of a minority should not rob us of what have become inarguably inalienable human rights. With our homes, livelihoods, and even geophysical existences at risk, raised ambition on climate change is not optional. It is vital.
Somali youth climate activist Marian Hussein Usman speaking just moments ago here in Warsaw, Poland at the UN Climate Summit, addressing the plenary. Earlier this month, a deadly cyclone slammed the Puntland region of Somalia, wreaking havoc on an already vulnerable population. Approximately 300 people died. The UN estimates 30,000 people are in desperate need of assistance. Several local groups have put the number closer to 50,000. Hundreds of people remain missing. The cyclone has gotten very little international media attention. Marian Usman is joining us now right from the plenary. It's good to be with you. Marian, where do you live?
I live in Mogadishu, and my grandparents live in Afgoy, so I'm in between the two. It's a village just outside Mogadishu, about an hour.
And how does climate change affect Somalia?
Several different ways. You did mention the cyclone, which was a pretty pertinent example, given it just happened a week ago. But in addition, there are two kind of key areas in Somalia that are have a lot of potential in terms of economic growth for the entire country, which are agriculture and fishing. Of all the countries in Africa, Somalia has the longest coastline, and ocean acidification is obviously wreaking havoc on biodiversity in a lot of these communities. Many fishing towns rely on these resources and have been spurred to kind of take up things like piracy as a result of having no place to turn, given that our government is not the most stable in the world, I guess, and is working to kind of solidify itself after 22 years of civil war.
When people hear about Somalia, at least in the United States, it's usually accompanied by the words famine or piracy.
It's true.
What's the connection to climate change?
Well, I'd like to think that when the going gets tough, people take things into their own hands, and so for climate change to be taking very necessary resources and livelihoods from people is something that stimulates a lot of crime, and people are desperate, I guess. But I'd like to think that the situation is improving substantially in Somalia, just assuming that climate change does not continue to wreak havoc and deprive people of their homes and their incomes and all those sorts.
Hundreds of people marched out of the summit. It was unprecedented yesterday, but you're inside. In fact, you spoke inside. You addressed the plenary.
It was really moving to be able to see all that yesterday, and then there's still quite a few people that were in the plenary that I had the opportunity to address today. The unfortunate reality of what's been happening in the past 2 weeks here is that youth haven't been given nearly as much inclusion into what's been going on, which is obviously reached a boiling point with a lot of the non-governmental organizations that are here in Warsaw at the moment.
Why are you devoting your life to the issue of climate, of all of the issues?
Because, I mean, I'm going to end up inheriting what's left of the planet after these negotiations sort themselves out, and I would hope that things are in a necessary shape, like a decent shape, so that we have something to work with. And Somalia, again, is a country that I want to see improve. I want to be able to see the same Somalia that my parents saw when they were growing up. So it's all part of the hope that the entire situation will improve.
I want to thank you for being with us. Marian Hussein Osman, Somali climate change activist who addressed the summit today on behalf of youth delegates. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. As we turn to another voice from the continent of Africa, South African activist and Professor Patrick Bond, Democracy Now!'s Mike Burke caught up with him at Saturday's March for Climate and Social Justice here in Warsaw.
I'm Patrick Bond in Durban, South Africa, the Center for Civil Society, and 2 years ago in Durban, the COP17 was a terrible disappointment, and I'm here with a lot of the activists from the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, other groups, really to see if we can revive the momentum of climate justice, which we sort of lost at that point. And the enemy team, which is the bankers, and the bureaucrats are trying to revive their vision, carbon trading as the core solution. It was in the Kyoto Protocol, and the question is whether they're going to find any more money and subsidies to bring it back. We hope not.
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
The carbon trading idea that the COP19 is probably going to try to revive at the global scale really has been absolutely a failure here in Europe, and partly because the Polish government and the corporations have abused it so much. But in general, the idea that we should turn over the planet to bankers to allow them to arrange an efficient trading of the right to pollute, carbon trading, from the Kyoto Protocol. Al Gore was very much supportive then. That's really not worked, and now Jim Yong Kim, the World Bank president, has put that back onto the agenda a few weeks ago. So I'm quite worried that unless we show more of the opposition and the demand for absolute cuts, paying climate debt and not messing around with banker-type solutions like trading rights to pollute, we might see this problem get much, much worse more quickly. It's what we call a false solution, and therefore has to be contested, along with all the other areas of debate here, especially the fact that again and again the United States will come to these meetings sabotage. And what I'm also worried about, they did an alliance the last time in Europe, in Copenhagen, with Brazil, with China, with India and South Africa, the basic countries. And that was why the Copenhagen Accord was such a disaster. You know, basically big polluters slapping each other on the back. I pollute more, you pollute more, it's a deal. And that was the nature of the last major effort to get protesters out on the street, so we have to really redouble our efforts to make sure that configuration doesn't occur again.
South African activist and Professor Patrick Bond speaking to Democracy Now!'s Mike Burke at Saturday's March for Climate and Social Justice here in Warsaw. Before we go to break, I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the facts and figures that are all over the hallways here at the National Stadium here in Warsaw, where the Climate Summit is taking place. Written in Polish and in English, it says, worldwide, 1 in 4 mammal species are now threatened by extinction. Likewise, 1 in 8 bird species, 1 in 3 species of fish, 2 in 5 amphibians, and more than half the flowering plants and insects. Species of fauna and flora are today disappearing between 1,000 and 10,000 times more rapidly than their natural rate of extinction. We're talking about a 6th episode of mass extinction, for which this time, man alone is responsible. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we're going to go to the convergence space, where hundreds of people go to organize for what happens outside the summit and sometimes inside. And then we speak of representatives, again, of Africa. Stay with us.